Alright, welcome back to the SuperCoach NRL channel. In this video, we're going to look at the second part of our three-part series in the pre-season, just looking at some different options to consider for SuperCoach in season, or NRL SuperCoach I should say, in season 2024. And in this video, we're going to focus on the mid-price options. And so with mid-price, what we mean, for the purpose of this video anyway, is somewhere between 400 and 600k. There may be a couple of exceptions to that rule, potentially. I think I've done alright so far, but I did run out of money before I could finish the squad. But I did put the squad out there just because I'd forget players as I went through. As usually these guys aren't at top of mind. You know, these are the ones where if you've got a bit of money left and you want some points, but you also want some upside, what are some potential options we could have there? So we'll go through, again, start at hooker and go from there. So the two options that I've picked out are Api Coruscant and Reece Robson. And in saying that, if we just have a quick look at the other sort of options, I was heavily considering Wade Egan for this list. Reed Marnie is a good option as well, but I went with Coruscant and Robson, I guess because they best typify the sort of players in this range. And that, I guess with Coruscant, he does play 80 minutes generally. Reece Robson plays close to 80 minutes. So for that reason, I could have put Reed Marnie in this conversation, but I guess for the two different types of hookers that you get, you've got Coruscant, who's well known for his ball playing ability. And you get the likes of Marnie is also in that sort of category. Wade Egan perhaps as well. Then you got Reece Robson, who's very solid in the middle defensively, and can still distribute the ball well, but considered more of that workhorse type hooker. So your Blake Brayley is definitely in that category. I guess Lachlan Croker, perhaps he's improved that side of his game. Was probably considered more of a ball playing type hooker back then. Brandon Smith, I guess you could include in that category as well. But yeah, you look their price; they aren't cheap at 570 to 560 respectively. So I mean, if you drop the 100k of Coruscant, you could get Smith. If that's what you needed for the balance of your team. But I guess these are the sort of the mid-range options that you could take as a bit of a pod or a bit of a flyer. Or, they could go on a bit of a run. You could ride that wave. They're the sort of guys we're talking about. So I've just got them in at the moment. But again, there is a few other options in that mid-price sort of area for hookers. Front rowers. So my first pick there is Junior Paulo from the Eels. He's just an absolute unit of a human being, but loves an offload, can find a way to the try line. So if you're looking for that point of difference type prop, they're sort of the players you want that have that little upside. Because with a lot of the other options, you're just going to get a solid base of, they'll play 50 minutes, get about a point a minute, and get 50 points every week. That's fine, but it's not going to compare to the likes of Tino, Fanua Blake, Payne Haas. So for that reason, we don't usually mess with too many of the mid prices, but throw some in there because we're talking about them across the board. Ruben Cotter's a really interesting one. His points per minute's usually awesome. It's just his minutes can fluctuate, particularly around Origin, where they seem to want to use him for 80 minutes on the edge when he only plays 55, 60 minutes a week on in NRL land. But he loves it, and we love it as Queenslanders watching him. So really handy sort of point of difference, particularly with the dual position throughout the offers. There's not a lot in the higher echelons that offer that sort of flexibility, but he is one of them. Then I've got Stefano Utikamanu from the Tigers. So I know he was hyped up a bit last year as a potential mid-price option. But I think the thing to remember with him is he is still really young. I think he's only like 21, 22, which, most prop forwards don't sort of get into it until their late 20s. So the fact that, he's as impressive as he is so young suggests that, he could definitely improve upon his price point by the end of the year. Whether he's going to be top four, I wouldn't have thought so. But, if you had two of those big hitters and perhaps he was your third option, it wouldn't be the worst. And speaking of young guys that have potential for upward mobility, I've got Tom Flegler. So he's played for Queensland. I think he might have played for Australia too, from memory. He's moving across to the Dolphins this year. And I think what that provides is a bit more opportunity for minutes. So he was sort of stuck behind Payne Haas and Pat Carrigan at the Broncos. They take up a lot of minutes in their middle rotation. So Flegler does have that potential to push him up a bit. I'm not suggesting a lot. I'm not saying he's going to make 150k in value, but again, if you want that cheaper sort of third front row option at the end of the season, he'll do a job, I think. Onto the second row, and this is, I guess I've said it already in the preseason team picker video. There is a lot of value in the second row. So much so that I'm considering not going with a keeper in the second row, as great as it would be to have Fafita, to have Hopgood, to have Nikora. I think, we can get away with having these guys and most of them making close to 150k. Um, and then, being able to move them to those keepers once they've got that price rise and getting the points while we're at it. So number one on the list there is my man. I'm going to say that every time there's a Bulldogs player, but Viliami Kikau. Um, he come across the Dogs last year and then unfortunately had that pec injury. So just as he was sort of starting to get into the side, but a full pre-season of work, he's been around the boys for 12 months now. So those combinations will be improving all the time. A bit more attacking coming in this year with the likes of Crichton, um, Blake Taff, Connor Tracy. Also, got the guys like Josh Curran, to a bit more go forward to make space for Kikau to do his thing. So, I think he'll definitely improve on his 468. Whether he's an out and out keeper like he has been in the past, I wouldn't say for sure. But I think out of this slot, he is the most likely to be that sort of player. Bo Fermor, so from the Titans, missed last year with the ACL, but even when he was playing opposite David Fafita, he did seem to find a fair bit of the ball and score enough SuperCoach points in his own right. So a bit of value there around Bo Fermor. Siwa Wong is one I'm probably not personally keen on, but there's a lot of chat that he is going to take that next step this year at the Roosters and sort of establish himself on the edge. Um, it looks like they're starting to shift the likes of Angus Crichton and Tupanua into the middle a bit more. Um, they've got Nat Butcher playing on an edge, but he can play in the middle. So I guess in terms of being a pure second rower, seems like Wong is their best bet. It's just whether he gets the starting spot or not. And they've got options there, which makes me a bit wary. A bit like Bo Fermor, Sean Lane was affected by injury last year. But what it appears to be, even in their best 17, is they play Ryan Madison off the bench, which basically frees he and Bryce Cartwright up on the edge. And obviously Hopgood playing 13 through the middle. So yeah, if Sean Lane can stay fit, he is a 600k player, so that's 150k built in. Pierre Cora is one I've talked a bit about already in preseason, but he's looks like he's the one that's gonna slot in for Kurt Capewell. So you'd imagine 80 minutes on the edge. He'll definitely have some value in that price, and Josh Curran. So as I just talked about, Viliami Kikau, part of the Bulldogs recruitment drive this year, and I think probably could go underrated as the most important piece in that, he's such a workhorse, does all the tough work through the middle. It's something the Bulldogs definitely need more of in their squad. So super happy to have him on board this year. Um, and yeah, I think with that, his value is based on a few sort of down games in terms of the Warriors playing off the bench, 20 minutes sort of utility edge, whatever role. But yeah, he'll definitely get more minutes this year. Into the halves, and so I've gone slightly above 600k here, but given how expensive Hines and Cleary are, I think you can call Sam Walker mid price at 610. So had a bit of a rough season last year. Spent some time in reserve grade. Had some issues with concussion. So if he can get fit and firing, and the Roosters as a whole can lift as a team, I think a lot of that will be around Sam Walker. So you can definitely see him pushing up towards the top five halfback overall for the season. So definitely one if you're looking at that mid-price flyer option in the halves. If you've got the money at 610, I think Sam Walker could definitely offer some value. And I've also gone for Toby Sexton, so perhaps a little bit of Bulldog bias here, but he obviously came across mid-season, seemed to slot in straight away fairly well. Now it wasn't seamless by any stretch, um, but if he can continue to develop those combinations and again full off season to work on that, I think he could be a handy little option if required at the Dogs. At 5'8", Braden Trindle, who's probably one of my favourite sort of value, even cheapy half options. Um, just given, that he will be playing in the six, and he's shown in the past he can perform at NRL level. So when you put all that together, job security, past performance, good price, dual position, it seems like a no-brainer to try and use him in your squad somewhere. It saves you a bit of money to upgrade elsewhere, or fit in an extra gun somewhere. Um, so I mean, I definitely like Trindle, and maybe a bit of a forgotten man, and definitely not one to start with this season. But I think Adam Dewey could be a real point of difference in the back half of the year. So obviously had that terrible ACL injury, I believe it was, um, last year's, and there's expecting him to come back mid-season this year. But if he can come back fit and firing, he is definitely the most creative attacking sort of option that the Tigers have. So they would be tempted to maybe play him in the centres, given their outside backs are a little bit thin. But I really think they should be playing him at six. And if he's playing at six and he's kicking goals, although with Aiden Caesar there this year might not be the case. But yeah, it could be a really handy point of difference. The back end of the season, if you can't quite afford to run with two of Brown, Munster, Cody Walker. Onto the centres, you can see where I've run out of money here, but that's okay. So Dane Mariner's one player that there's been a bit of hype about at the Broncos. Um, Expected to fill in the gap left by Herbie Farnworth. So has only played a few games last year, but looked really good. So if you can continue that throughout a full season, you'll definitely get some points at a good price. Connor Tracy from the Bulldogs as well. I put Stephen Crichton in my guns video under the provision that he's going to play fullback. The talk is that it's going to be Connor Tracy playing fullback. So if that's the case, well, Tracy presents good value at less than 600k. If you can get fullbacks in the centre wing slot, it's like having an extra fullback. It's almost a bit of a cheat code in SuperCoach. So for that reason, if Tracy gets the nod, he's definitely a value option, and definitely one I'll be pushing to find a spot for in my team, because he has again shown it at the Sharks that he's capable at NRL level. Probably his price is based on being a centre, so fullback will mean there's a bit of value there. Speaking of value fullback options, not that I think he's playing fullback this year, but Tuivasa Sheck, maybe just a blast from the past, a bit of reminiscing here. But he is pretty good at football. So and if something did happen to CNK, what's to say they don't just slot him at fullback and he carves it up. So a really interesting option, but definitely one you can have a look at first. Katoni Staggs, so I think he's the dictionary definition of a mid-price centre wing option. He goes on runs where he just kills it and tons up, and then he goes quiet for a while, and then so you never quite know what you're getting from him. But that upside, if that's what you're chasing, there's not too many better in the price range than Katoni Staggs. Put Jake Averillo, so again, maybe a Bulldogs connection there, a bit of bias, but if he can get the fullback role at the Dolphins, it'll be pretty hard to take away from the hammer, if we're being completely honest. But he's that sort of player that can play fullback, centre, 5'8". Again, probably a bit too versatile for his own good. But it all depends on position. There definitely could be some value for Averillo if he can find a spot and really cement it. And Dan Russell I've put in as well. So you've got him. You've also got Dylan Lucas from the Knights that are centre wing, second row, dual position, and both potentially starting on their respective edges. I think Russell's probably the more nailed on one. There's the English import at the Knights who's a good chance of taking that edge spot, which is sort of why I have Lucas below Russell. Um, but yeah, you could do worse than having one or even both of them in your side, creating that flexibility between second row, centre wing, particularly towards the end of the season. It's a godsend. And this is where I ran out of money, so I'll just quickly get rid of a few players, free up some cash. Hopefully that's enough. But the final centre wing option I wanted to have a look at, or discuss, I suppose, Taylor May. So very similar to Bo Fermor. Missed all of last year with the ACL. Year before that, he couldn't stop scoring tries for Penrith. You'd imagine he'll move back on the wing this year, and they'll probably move Taruva into the centres where the gap from Stephen Crichton's been made. As my phone's going off. Who's calling? Doesn't matter. Call them back if it's urgent. Excuse me, now I lost my train of thought. So yeah, Talon May, I think he'll just slot back on the wing in what is the best attacking side in the competition. So at 458, there is definitely some built-in value with that price. Onto the fullbacks, and so no prizes for guessing the first one. Admittedly, just outside the 600k limit that we set, but Ryan Pappenhausen sounds like he's not going to be back for round one. But once he's back and firing, you can guarantee, there's not too many better fullback options out there. So definitely presents some good value. It's part of the reason why I'm considering not going with two gun fullbacks at the start of the year. Potentially looking at a gun and a cheapie. And then obviously when Pappenhausen comes in, hopefully it's not a bridge too far to jump across and get Pappenhausen as my second fullback. And then, you can always flip him around as he increases in value if, you want to eventually get to a Mitchell, Ponga, Tommy Turbo type pick for the back end of the season. The other option that I think is pretty interesting at the price, and again, it depends on how the team shapes up, but Jaden Campbell. I think he's almost like too good to be on the bench, if that makes sense. He needs to be on the field. They're just, I guess, they've got Kieran Foran who's steering them around, but I think they need to make a decision on what the future halves are going to be, and whether that's Brimson and Boyd. And then if that's the case, well, one of them is the one that sits on the bench and becomes a utility. And it's a bit harsh on maybe on AJ Brimson because he is such a talented player as well. But I guess I think what that does is then frees up Campbell to play fullback, and he's a really good fullback. If he does get that sort of spot at 450k, he's definitely one worth considering playing. But that's more dependent on team position, team setup, I should say. But anyway, there's the video looking at the mid-price options done. So as always, if you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, mid-price options that avoided or missed, let me know in the comment section below. Give us a like if you're enjoying the NRL content. Subscribe for all the fantasy stuff we've got going on. And other than that, we'll catch you in the next one.